In the mountains of Nuevo León, Mexico, stands a convent that has remained silent for more than 270 years. Its rose-colored stone walls guard a secret that once shook New Spain to its core. On August 15, 1750, 43 poor Clare nuns vanished without leaving a single trace. There were no screams, no signs of struggle, no blood, only the echo of their prayers, which faded away with the dawn. The people of the nearby village swore they heard the convent bells ringing for days, even though there was no one left to ring them. For decades, the ecclesiastical authorities kept this place sealed, forbidding any investigation. But walls remember, and secrets buried in stone always find a way to surface. What we discovered about the fate of these women will forever change the way you see religious devotion. Before continuing with the story of Ignacio Mendoza, if you enjoy mysteries like this one, don't forget to subscribe and activate notifications. Every week, we bring new tales that will leave you breathless. Now, let us return to the convent of Santa Clara and uncover what truly happened that night. The convent of Santa Clara de Asís was founded in 1720, hidden away in a secluded valley of the Sierra Madre Oriental, near the town of Aramberry in Nuevo León. It was a time when Catholic faith spread across New Spain like a river that flooded everything in its path. Wealthy families of Monterrey sent their daughters to this sacred retreat, seeking to purify their souls and elevate the family's status before both God and society. The very construction of the convent had been seen as a miracle. Don Sebastián de Villarreal, a wealthy merchant enriched by the silver mines of Zacatecas, donated his entire fortune to raise its walls after his only daughter, Esperanza, died of yellow fever at just 15 years old. "My gold will build a bridge between earth and heaven," he had declared before the Bishop of Linares, "so that other young women may find in prayer what my daughter never could." In life, the convent stood as a fortress of faith, its walls 2 meters thick, its towers piercing the clouds, and a central cloister where a natural spring bubbled forth, considered holy by the nuns. By 1750, 43 women lived there, most of them between the ages of 18 and 25, from the most prestigious families of northeastern Mexico. The abbess, Sor Magdalena de la Cruz, was a 40-year-old woman whose beauty had once been legendary in Monterrey before she took her vows. It was said she had rejected 3 wealthy suitors in order to dedicate herself entirely to Christ. Under her leadership, the convent had become a model of discipline and devotion. The nuns would rise at 4 in the morning for matins. They worked in silence, cultivating medicinal herbs, copying sacred manuscripts, and dedicating up to 8 hours each day to contemplative prayer. Life in the convent followed the unchanging rhythm of the bells. The villagers of Aramberry had learned to guide their daily routines by the sound that drifted down from the mountain. The morning peal at dawn, the solemn toll at noon, and the gentle chime at dusk that called for reflection. For 30 years, this sound marked an era of peaceful existence, until that fateful morning in August, when everything changed forever. August 14th, 1750, began like any other day in the convent of Santa Clara. Yet the records of Father Geronimo Montemayor, the convent chaplain, revealed disturbing details about those final 24 hours. In his diary, written in a hand that grew more and more unsteady, he described a series of events that he believed to be signs of divine tribulation. It all started during the dawn mass. While the nuns recited the Ave Maria, one of the novices, ironically named Esperanza, after the deceased daughter of the convent's founder, began to tremble violently. Her eyes turned completely white, and she spoke in a language that none of the sisters could recognize. Words poured out of her throat like boiling water, an unbroken torrent that lasted exactly 7 minutes. Sor Magdalena tried to calm her with prayers, but when she laid her hand on the young novice's shoulder, she too began to convulse. One after another, the 43 women fell into the same strange trance, their voices blending into a chorus of guttural sounds that Father Montemayor later described as the language of the damned. Terrified, the chaplain fled the convent, vowing to return with ecclesiastical reinforcements. He rode through the night to Linares to alert the bishop, but when he returned at dawn on August 15th, accompanied by 6 priests and a detachment of soldiers, the convent was completely empty. The doors stood wide open. The beds were neatly made with military precision. Meals remained hot in the kitchen, as though the nuns had vanished in the middle of breakfast. In the central cloister, the sacred spring had changed color. The once crystal-clear waters now floated deep, dark red, staining the stone like coagulated blood. But what disturbed them most was the silence. No flutter of wings, no whisper of wind among the walls. It was as though the convent had been lifted from the world of the living and dropped into an absolute void. The soldiers searched every corner, every cell, every hidden passage they knew of. They found no sign of violence, no trace of a struggle, not a single drop of blood. The 43 women had simply vanished, like smoke dissolving in the morning air. In his final diary entry, Father Montemayor wrote, "The Lord has permitted something terrible to happen in this sacred place. May God forgive us for what we awakened with our prayers." The next day, the bishop ordered the convent sealed, forever. The years following the mystery of the convent of Santa Clara transformed the entire region of Aramberry. What had once been a prosperous town, thriving on agriculture and trade with the nearby mines, slowly turned into a place marked by superstition and fear. The families of the missing nuns pressed the ecclesiastical authorities for decades, demanding that the investigation be reopened. Don Fernando de Trevino, whose 3 daughters had taken the veil at the convent, sold all his properties to hire private investigators. For 5 long years, these men scoured the mountains, searching for any trace of the lost women. They found empty caves, abandoned smugglers' camps, and animal bones, but never a single clue to explain the fate of the 43 souls. The official version of the church claimed that the nuns had been called by God to a higher mission, an explanation that satisfied some, but left deep doubts in others. The older inhabitants of Aramberry began to whisper darker theories, that the women had been kidnapped by bandits, that they had fled with secret lovers, or worse, that they had been possessed by diabolical forces. Over the years, the sealed convent became the center of an increasingly sinister local mythology. Shepherds leading their flocks through the nearby mountains swore they heard Gregorian chants floating from the empty towers on nights of the full moon. Hunters spoke of strange lights dancing in the boarded-up windows and of a ghostly figure dressed in white walking through the abandoned gardens. In 1780, 30 years after the disappearance, a group of village teenagers dared each other to climb the convent walls. Only one returned. He came back mute, his hair turned completely white, though he was only 16 years old. He never spoke another word. Yet every year, on August 15th, the anniversary of the disappearance, the boy would walk up to the convent and remain there until dawn, staring silently at the towers. The most widely accepted theory at the time was that the nuns had been victims of a heretical sect operating in the mountains. It was said that worshippers of the devil had infiltrated the convent and led the women into satanic rituals inside hidden caves. This explanation, though macabre, at least offered some kind of human logic to an otherwise supernatural mystery. And yet, something never quite fit with any of these theories: the convent itself. Despite decades of abandonment, the walls showed no signs of decay. The wood never rotted. Strangely, no wild animals ever made nests inside its empty halls. It was as if the place had been suspended in time, waiting for something or someone. In March of 1823, 73 years after the disappearance, an unexpected visitor arrived in Aramberry. His name was Ignacio Mendoza, and he would forever change the understanding of the mystery. He introduced himself as a historian from the University of Mexico, sent by the new Republican authorities to catalog abandoned ecclesiastical properties after the War of Independence. Mendoza was a meticulous man in his middle years, with a neatly trimmed gray beard and piercing green eyes that seemed to register every detail. He had studied in Europe and held an impeccable reputation as a researcher of historical archives. But what truly drove him to Nuevo León was not his official assignment. It was a personal obsession. His great-grandmother, Sir Carmen de Los Angeles, had been one of the missing nuns. For weeks, Mendoza interviewed the eldest inhabitants of the village, gathering testimonies and legends preserved through oral tradition. But his real goal was to gain access to the sealed convent. After long negotiations with local authorities and a few discreet bribes, he finally secured the necessary permits. On August 15, 1823, exactly 73 years to the day since the disappearance, Ignacio Mendoza stepped across the threshold of the convent of Santa Clara for the very first time. He was accompanied by 2 local laborers and the new parish priest of Aramberry, Father Miguel Hidalgo Salinas, not related to the famous insurgent hero, though equally courageous. What they found defied all logic. The convent was exactly as it had been left in 1750. The beds were neatly made. The books in the library remained open. Even the food in the kitchen had not decomposed, as if time itself had frozen within those walls. But it was in the abbess's chamber where Mendoza made the discovery that would change everything. Beneath a loose floorboard, he uncovered a small carved wooden chest containing 3 items: a personal diary of Sor Magdalena de la Cruz, a strangely designed wrought iron key, and a hand-drawn map revealing a section of the convent that did not exist in any official plans. The diary was written in a mix of Spanish and Latin, with some passages appearing in code. At first, the pages described the daily life of the convent, but as they approached August of 1750, the tone grew increasingly disturbed. In an entry dated August 10th, just 4 days before the disappearance, Sor Magdalena wrote, "The visions intensify. He calls us from below. The sisters can no longer resist his voice. May God forgive us for what we are about to do." The map indicated that the key belonged to a door located in the convent's underground cellars, in a section that officially did not exist. Guided by the drawing, Mendoza and his companions searched for hours until they found a hidden door behind a false wall in the food storage room. When he slid the key into the rusted lock, the mechanism turned with surprising ease, as though it had been oiled recently. The door opened with a metallic groan that echoed throughout the convent. From beyond spilled the smell of incense, mixed with something darker, something that smelled like death, a very ancient death. A stone staircase descended into total darkness. Ignacio Mendoza lit a torch and began to walk down, unaware that he was about to uncover the most terrible truth imaginable. The stone steps spiraled downward for what felt like endless minutes. Ignacio Mendoza counted them carefully, 66 in total, before reaching a subterranean corridor stretching beneath the foundations of the convent. The walls were covered with carvings that bore no resemblance to any known Christian iconography. Interlaced circles, impossible geometric figures, and depictions of creatures that seemed ripped from nightmares. The torchlight made the engravings appear to move, their shadows dancing in grotesque shapes. Mendoza felt his hands trembling, not only from the cold, damp air, but from a deepening sensation that he was not alone down there. Each step echoed strangely, as though another set of footsteps followed, just a heartbeat behind. At the end of the passage lay a circular chamber, about 10 meters across. In the center rose an altar of black stone, unmistakably not Christian. It was carved with the same precision as a Gothic cathedral, yet its shapes evoked something far older and far more sinister. Surrounding the altar, arranged in a perfect circle, stood 43 carved wooden chairs. Each bore a name inscribed in Latin. Mendoza read them in growing horror. Sor Magdalena de la Cruz, Sor Carmen de los Angeles, his own great-grandmother, Sor Esperanza del Sacramento. Every name belonged to one of the missing nuns, as if someone had prepared that chamber specifically for their final gathering. But what truly froze Mendoza's blood was what he found upon the altar itself. 43 neatly folded habits lay arranged in perfect rows. Each bore the name of its owner embroidered on the fabric. Beneath every garment rested a personal item, a rosary, a letter from family, a small crucifix. It was as though the women had carefully disrobed and left their belongings behind before stepping into something unspeakable. On the ground around the altar, Mendoza found rings of salt mixed with ashes. At the center of each circle was a dark stain, dried blood. The patterns formed a design he recognized from his studies, an alchemical symbol known as the Gate of Transmutation, once used by medieval sects who believed they could transform human matter into pure spiritual essence. Then, beneath Sor Magdalena's habit, Mendoza discovered a parchment sealed with red wax. The seal bore the same geometric symbol carved into the walls. With trembling hands, he broke it open. It was a confession written in the abbess's own hand, and its contents were so disturbing that Mendoza had to sit down in one of the empty chairs to keep reading. The text revealed that since 1748, 2 years before the disappearance. The nuns had been in contact with an entity that spoke to them through visions and dreams. At first, they believed it divine. It promised them a form of spiritual ascension, liberation from their mortal bodies to unite directly with the sacred. The confession described nocturnal rituals that began as ecstatic prayer sessions, but slowly grew into something far darker. The entity demanded ever greater sacrifices, first extreme fasting, then self-flagellation, and finally, the total renunciation of their earthly existence. "We have come to understand that our bodies are prisons for the soul," Sir Magdalena wrote. "He has shown us the path to shed this corrupt flesh and ascend to a realm where there is no pain, no desire, no doubt. On August 15th, when the stars align as he has commanded, we shall perform the final ritual. Whoever finds this confession must know, we were not victims, but architects of our own glorious destiny." When Mendoza lifted his eyes from the parchment, he nearly leapt from his chair. Seated in every one of the 43 chairs were now faint, translucent figures. The nuns, or what remained of them, sat in the same posture as on the night of their disappearance, eyes closed, hands joined in prayer. Their lips moved silently, chanting words he could not hear, but could feel resonating deep within his bones. The torchlight flickered violently. Mendoza realized he faced a choice: flee immediately from this cursed place, or stay and uncover what had truly become of those women on that fateful night of August 15th, 1750. Ignacio Mendoza chose to stay. Ignacio Mendoza lit a second torch from his satchel and cautiously approached the black stone altar. Up close, he realized it was not truly an altar at all, but some kind of mechanism. The surface was engraved with markings that formed a star map corresponding to the constellations of August 1750. When Mendoza accidentally pressed one of the carved stars, the entire surface shifted with a soft, mechanical grinding, like the gears of a giant clock. Slowly, the center of the altar opened, revealing a hidden cavity. Inside lay 43 small crystal vessels, each the size of a human fist. Within every vessel pulsed a pale blue luminescence, rhythmic, like the beating of a heart. Each container bore the name of a nun. At that moment, the translucent figures grew sharper, their forms more defined. A chorus of whispers filled the chamber, faint at first, then unmistakable words. It was not as we expected. He deceived us, promised us freedom, but gave us prison. The clearest voice was that of Sor Magdalena, speaking as though directly to him. The entity we contacted was not divine. It was something far older, something that had been waiting beneath this earth since before the Spaniards arrived. The symbols carved on these walls were not meant to summon it, they were meant to keep it sealed. But in our ignorance, we misread them. We freed what we should have kept bound. Mendoza's stomach knotted as he realized the truth. The nuns had been victims of their own devotion. Seeking a deeper mystical union, they had instead broken open a prison that had been locked for centuries. The entity manipulated them, promising ascension, but instead transformed them into unwilling wardens of its underground cage. Sor Magdalena's voice continued. The ritual of August 15th was not our death. It was our transformation into sentinels. Our souls were extracted and confined within these vessels, feeding the seals that keep the entity dormant. For 73 years we have fueled its prison with our essence, holding it asleep so it cannot wake and unleash destruction upon the world. Mendoza staggered toward one of the vessels, the one inscribed with the name Sor Carmen de Los Angeles, his great-grandmother. The blue light inside flickered more brightly, almost as if it recognized his presence. "How can I free you?" he asked aloud. The answer came not as words, but as sudden knowledge pressed directly into his mind. There were only two choices. Someone must willingly take the place of the nuns as guardian, alone, for eternity. Or all 43 must be released at once, an act that would awaken the entity they had fought to contain. But then, another voice arose. This one was Esperanza, the novice who had first convulsed on that final morning. "There is a third way. The symbols can be rewritten. We lack the knowledge, but you possess it." Mendoza remembered his studies of medieval alchemy in Europe. The carvings on the walls were not merely mystical. They were a kind of mathematical language, a formula of energy patterns. If he could rewrite the equation, perhaps he could alter the nature of the seal without freeing the entity. For hours, Mendoza worked feverishly, chiseling new symbols into the stone walls with the tools he had found near the altar. The nuns guided him with whispers that grew weaker and weaker, as if lending him their energy was draining the last of their strength. At last, when the new configuration was complete, the entire chamber trembled. The crystal vessels lifted into the air, floating slowly above the altar. The blue essence inside each one pulsed brightly one final time, and then dissolved into nothingness. One by one, the ghostly figures of the nuns became solid for the briefest instant. They smiled, radiant, serene, and then vanished forever. The black stone altar cracked, crumbled, and disintegrated into dust. The engraved symbols along the walls faded as if they had never existed. The entity remained sealed, but now, not by human souls. Instead, the natural mechanisms of the earth itself held it bound, beyond the reach of prayer or ritual. At dawn on August 16, 1823, Ignacio Mendoza emerged from the convent of Santa Clara, carrying only Sor Magdalena's diary and her final confession. Behind him, the underground stairway collapsed, sealing the chamber forever. In the following days, he wrote an official report describing the convent as structurally unsafe and of no significant historical value. He recommended its immediate demolition. But in his private notes, he meticulously documented everything he had witnessed, creating a secret archive he would guard for the rest of his life. In September 1823, the convent of Santa Clara was demolished. For the first time in 73 years, the people of Aramberry noticed that the land no longer radiated its unnatural chill. Animals returned. Plants grew freely. The ghost stories ceased. Mendoza returned to Mexico City and continued his career as a historian, never again investigating the supernatural. He married, had children, and lived a quiet life dedicated to recording ordinary history. Yet every August 15th, without fail, he would visit the nearest church and light 43 candles, one for each nun whose soul he had set free. On his deathbed in 1867, he entrusted his eldest son with a sealed chest, with instructions that it should only be opened if similar phenomena ever arose in other convents or churches in Mexico. "There are things in this world," he whispered, "too terrible to remember every day, but too dangerous to be forgotten entirely." The land where the convent of Santa Clara once stood is now a thriving cattle ranch. The current owners, the Hernandez family, have lived there for 5 generations without ever experiencing anything unusual. But the older ranch workers still whisper about certain nights in August. On clear evenings, they say, a soft light sometimes dances over the spot where the convent's high altar once stood. It is not a frightening light, they insist. On the contrary, it is gentle, like the glow of votive candles. It lasts only a few minutes before fading away into the dark. Those who have seen it describe it as a silent reminder that some prayers, eventually, are answered. The story of the convent of Santa Clara teaches us that faith, when sincere but misdirected, can open doors that were better left closed. But it also shows us that true love, like that of a great-grandson for the ancestor he never met, can be stronger than any curse. So what do you think of this story? Do you believe Ignacio Mendoza truly freed the nuns, or merely changed the shape of their prison? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale and want more chilling legends like it, subscribe, ring the bell, and share it with someone who loves mysteries. We'll see you in the next story.